So what is limp mode or limp home mode? Some drivers have noticed warning lights coming up on the dashboard. Maybe the car's doing some weird things. So in this video, we're just going to explain what limp mode is, why your car has gone into limp mode, and help you to diagnose the common causes of the problems that typically put the car into limp home mode. And we just talk you through the diagnostic steps. There's many and varied reasons why your car is in limp home mode, so it's helpful to have a structured approach to diagnosing and fixing the problem. So limp home mode is basically a mode where the engine is trying to protect itself. It's noticed there's a problem. If it allows things to run normally, there will be a lot more damage potentially caused to your engine. So it restricts the RPMs, it restricts the power. You may find that you're stuck in one particular gear. So limp mode is very, very protective of your car and its engine. It's not to be ignored. A lot of drivers have experienced limp home mode and then it's disappeared, it's gone away. So they've assumed there's no longer a problem. And then it's come back with a vengeance and they've got a persistent problem. So the first warning sign you get of a limp home mode, even if it clears, should encourage you to take that car to a garage or to run some basic diagnostics yourself, because it could well indicate there is a looming problem on the horizon. So what are the symptoms of limp mode? Well, reduced power is the obvious one. The power output of the engine will be substantially reduced in order to protect it. And you will certainly notice that as a driver. You put your foot down to accelerate and everything happens much slower. It reminds you of that car you first got when you first passed your driving test that just didn't have the guts and would really struggle to get up a hill. Let me know in the comments what your first car was and what your experiences were, because I love hearing people's driving experiences. So you may also experience limited RPM. So where the engine would normally accelerate to the higher RPM levels, it no longer does that. It's restricting you to the bottom end of the RPM range. You will typically see some kind of warning light flashing up on the dashboard. It's the check engine light, the engine check light. You may see a car with a little spanner. There's lots of different icons. It's always a good idea to just make yourself familiar with all the different icons that could flash up on your dashboard. So check your handbook and just make sure that you're familiar with the problems and their associated warning signs as they flash up on your dashboard. So if you have an automatic transmission, you may be stuck in one particular gear. You may have trouble shifting gears, or the shift may be extremely slow. So that again can be indicators of a problem with the car that need to be addressed and the reason why you're in this limp mode. So what are the common causes? Well, the engine is continually monitoring what it's doing with the fuel and the air mix. If it notices that that's not burning effectively, if it notices the knock or pre-ignition or detonation going on inside the engine, it's going to try and protect itself and back off wherever it can. So to do that, it relies on a plethora of sensors around the engine. So typically it's monitoring the air coming into the engine, it's sniffing the exhaust gases. If you've got a DPF filter or a catalyst, there may be some additional pressure sensors in the exhaust that again will tell the engine how efficiently everything is working. So if those sensors are playing up or faulty, they're going to be giving weird readings to your poor car's computer, and it's not going to understand what to do with these readings. So it's going to panic and put the car into this protective limp mode. So transmission problems, particularly on automatic cars, low transmission levels, if the transmission is overheating for some reason, they can all be triggers for this limp home mode. So they're probably something to look out for as an additional with automatic cars, but often you will be stuck in one gear or you'll notice problems shifting. Whereas if it's more engine related, in most cases, limp mode will just affect the engine output power and not the gear changes themselves. So engine misfires, if the engine is misfiring, it's not burning the fuel correctly or the fuel air mix correctly as it goes into each cylinder. The exhaust sensors are going to get some weird readings of inefficient burning going on in the engine, even if it's only on just one cylinder, and that can cause the engine to panic and throw a limp mode. Always check the oil levels, the transmission fluid levels, because if these levels are low, that can often generate an excessive buildup of heat within components in the engine, again triggering this limp mode. We've mentioned sensors, but it's worth noting that as cars become more modern, more advanced, there's more and more sensors. There's a throttle position sensor in many new cars, and if that's doing weird stuff, again the ECU is going to panic. If your car's got a MAF or a MAT sensor on the intake again, they need to be clean and in good order. If they're giving wrong readings to the ECU, that's going to cause a problem with the way the engine is able to burn the fuel. And simple things like clogged filters. So if the air filter or the oil filter is clogged, that can affect the way the engine burns fuel effectively. So if it's not getting the sufficient supply of air into the engine, it's going to have real problems trying to burn the fuel. And if the oil filter is clogged, the circulation of oil is not going to be as effective. So you're probably going to be getting overheating, poor lubrication in different parts of the engine. So if you have a turbocharged car, there's another set of problems that can cause limp mode. So the car will expect a certain range of boost pressure from the turbo under certain driving conditions. So if it's getting too much boost, an overboost condition, or if it's not getting enough boost from the turbo, an underboost condition, it will throw a limp home mode. So they can be as simple as splits in the pipes that maybe feed the exhaust gases into the turbo, or the pressurized air from the turbo into the intake. If that pressure is escaping, that can cause the car to panic. If you've modified the car, maybe you've added an atmospheric dump valve, some engines really don't like that. You need to make some other modifications in order to allow that atmospheric dump valve to work correctly. So intercoolers themselves, if they've become restricted in some way, usually due to some kind of blockage or maybe a pipe split or the air is escaping from the intercooler, that can cause this problem where the ECU is detecting an issue with the air that's coming into the engine. The turbo itself, it's spinning at very high RPMs. If there's a problem with the lubrication, if the bearings in the turbo are faulty, if it's not spooling up correctly, if the wastegate actuator, if your turbo has got one, is not giving the correct amount of exhaust gases flowing in, that can cause these abnormalities that the ECU is not expecting. So if you are getting an overboost or underboost error, jump on that quickly, because that's probably going to indicate a problem somewhere. And often with most car problems, if you catch them early enough, you avoid them escalating into large bills later. So diagnostic steps, how do you diagnose a car when you've got a limp home warning message or an error light on the dashboard? Well, the first thing in most modern cars is just to download the error codes from the OBD2 port. There's lots of OBD readers out there. Most of them will interface with your mobile phone. They've got reasonably good apps now, and they can allow all sorts of adjustments to take place within the engine. But even the basic ones will just allow you to download the error codes, to clear the error codes, and you can just see if those error codes are popping up again. Sometimes cars do just throw random error codes, and it is often a one-off thing. But if you've cleared them and you notice the error codes are coming back, that can indicate there is a problem with that system within the car. So the error codes will typically give you a code, a P0196. There's a set of numbers associated. And if you do a search online, you will generally find an explanation as to what that circuit is, or what that sensor is, or what that error code actually relates to. If you've got a good OBD2 error code reader, it will often tell you what that error is, and it will categorize the errors and allow you to see what's going on inside the engine. So a lot of the diagnosis of limp home mode just requires common sense, really, looking around the engine, looking for split wires coming off the sensors, exposed wires, parts that have suffered due to vibration, maybe they've worn through and the electrical insulation on the wire has started to degrade. That can cause intermittent readings or problems that the ECU will panic about. So check all of the wiring inside the car, check all of the plug connections are all solid, that nothing's come loose. Check the pipes as well, particularly if you've got a turbo engine, those pipes that are coming from the turbocharger into the intake of the engine and around the intercooler itself. So you're looking for splits, hisses, hitting noises, and other issues that might indicate that some of that air pressure is disappearing. A lot of the systems within a car engine require a vacuum, and if there's a vacuum leak, that can adversely affect the operation of the engine. So checking the engine for vacuum leaks. I'm going to do a video in more detail in the future about checking and diagnosing vacuum leaks, because that's a helpful technique to have when you're looking after your car. So some sensors can be tested, thermostats, the hot wire MAF sensors, for example. It should be fairly obvious if they've started to become soiled or degraded visually. So if that's the case, then clean the sensor or get that sensor replaced if it's faulty. If you've got a thermostat that's not opening correctly, that will obviously need to be replaced. And if you've done all of this and it's still a bit of a mystery, then consult a mechanic, a specialist. They've got so much experience And if you've chosen a mechanic that is familiar with your brand of vehicle and knows your engine well, he can often get to the problem much more quickly than yourself or another mechanic, thereby saving money without having to go into that horrible trial and error process of changing random bits on the car in the hope that that's going to fix the problem. And in reality, it's not actually going to solve the problem. The problem's still there in some other system. So I hope this video has been useful to you. Please boot that like button. Let me know your experiences if you're having trouble with error codes on your car, or you've got Limp home mode and you just can't diagnose it. I'll do my best to get you some assistance and help if you drop a comment. Let me know as well if you've managed to solve a problem, because those little tips are invaluable to other people that have got similar problems. I've lined this video up for you, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, because we'd love you to stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in this next video.